Kitsap Sun editorial board, talking to the candidates for County Commissioner District 1. What we'll do is let you each have 3 minutes to introduce yourselves. Jim Campbell is going to wave when the 3 minutes are done, so then you'll know. So we'll let Rob go first.
I'll go wave to start with.
Okay.
Bring the hammer down then.
Well, good afternoon. Again, my name is Robert Gelder, and it's been my privilege, honor, and responsibility to serve you all as County Commissioner since March. I have 20 years of experience in the health and human services industry, including 10 years in executive leadership senior management, with the past a little over 7 years at Martha and Marion Paulsbo. I graduated salutatorian from my high school class and have a bachelor's degree from the University of Rochester. Prior to my appointment, I served a complete term on the County Citizens Budget Advisory Committee and again on the 2011 Budget Hearings Panel. I'm an active member of the Paulsbo North Kitsap Rotary Club, and I think in the past few days we've actually, one of my focuses really is commitment and service and integrity. And as Commissioner over the past several months, it's really been my task to listen and learn from all citizens of Kitsap County. And Mr. Tibbs in the recent past has talked about the need for transparency, and which I find interesting because he was appointed to the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, which was the county's first attempt to open up the budget process to the citizens of the county, but yet he quit. And Mr. Tibbs has talked about the need for independent thinking. And when it comes to independent thinking, I've demonstrated that when I voted opposite the other two county commissioners when it came to the countywide planning policies relative to the fully contained communities. And Mr. Tibbs has also talked about the county dipping into the reserves over and over again to balance the budget, when in fact, if he had stayed involved with the county in the budget process, he would have known that in beginning last year, the county has actually made investments back into the reserves of over $1 million last year, and will do so again this year. Since I took office a few months ago, I've been involved with lots of projects around the community, whether it's Kingston Village Green, Point No Point boat launch, etc. And I think it's important in terms of some of the things that I would like to accomplish as County Commissioner is to create a process by which we resize government to a sustainable level, look at our codes and regulations to make sure they're understandable and that they support business vitality throughout our community. And I also think it's important to help our local communities realize and attain their visions. I have the support and endorsement of over 150 individuals, elected officials, citizens, and organizations, including the home builders through the Affordable Housing Coalition of Kitsap County. I have appreciated the opportunity to serve the community. I bring a balanced, common sense approach to the office, and I look forward to serving the community for the days and years to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My name is Chris Tibbs, and I'm proud to be running to be your next Kitsap County Commissioner. I have lived in Kitsap County my entire life. Born and raised in Bremerton Naval Hospital, raised on Bainbridge Island. I truly understand, I think, more than my opponent, what it is to live in Kitsap County. I served on the Budget Committee with my opponent, and my opponent and the 11 other members of the committee unanimously elected me to the position of Vice Chair of the inaugural Kitsap County Budget Commission. And on the committee, we were structured and formed by the Board of County Commissioners to review spending priorities for Kitsap County and to really address some of the core funding issues for the county and the budget policies. During that time, I grew disenfranchised, or just disenchanted rather, with the county's stonewalling. And so after my term as vice chair ended, after 13 months, I stepped aside, and shortly thereafter the county commissioners actually abolished the budget committee and created a budget board. We have had an issue in Kitsap County for far too long of what I think is no independence and no transparency in county government. Unfortunately, for the last 37 years, each and every North Kitsap County Commissioner who's been a Democrat, from John Horsley to Steve Bauer, has resigned midway through their term and allowed their party to select their replacement. Each one, with the exception of one 3-year period where Republican Matt Ryan was a county commissioner for 37 years. This must stop. Now you say, well, Chris, this is the way the law works. The RCWs are quite clear about how we fulfill those vacancies. And I understand that they were lawfully filled vacancies, but this still doesn't change the fact that for 37 years we've had these changes. Incumbents are 99.7% likely to retain the office in Kitsap County over the last 10 years. If you look at all elections, that's a huge number, a huge number. My opponent has had the courage to stand for elected office with me on this time, but on 3 separate accounts, he stood for an appointed position, but never an elected office. He ran against Steve Bauer to be appointed Kitsap County Commissioner and failed. He stood for County Treasurer, having no financial background, standing against 3 people to be County Treasurer. Now, why is that important? Well, the County Treasurer is actually in charge of the bank. They're the bank of Kitsap County, but they're also the bank for all the schools, all the fire departments, all the junior taxing districts' money. So $3 billion in liquid capital. My opponent stood for the appointment process and at the last moment stepped aside. And this recently, 6 months ago, my opponent was allowed to be appointed to the Board of County Commissioners. My opponent was appointed by the county commissioners, 2 of which, Josh Brown and Charlotte Guido, both sit on the executive board of the Democratic Party of Kitsap County. My opponent is the prior chair of the North Kitsap Democratic Party. My opponent served on the executive board of the Kitsap County Democratic Party. How can he be independent and how can there be transparency when you appoint who you want to appoint? Thank you.
Rob, if you were re-elected, would you commit to staying in that office for 4 years?
Most definitely. I don't view this position as being a caretaker kind of position. When I was appointed 6.5 months ago, I committed then to, if successfully elected this fall, to complete the term through the end of next year. And of course, because nothing happens in this county, you can only affect so much change and improvement in our county in 18 months. So I would look to seek another term of my own next year.
Because this is an office that whichever one of you wins, you will run again next fall.
Yes.
The term is only through the end of next year.
13 months.
And would you both commit to running again next fall?
I am committed to running.
Most definitely.
I think that's over. Chris, can you expand on what you call stonewalling? You said that this is the commissioners. You just said the county was stonewalling, and that led you to quit. Can you explain that?
Well, that didn't lead me to quit. I served my term as the vice chair, and after my term expired, I stepped aside from the budget committee. Many people, probably 12 to 15 individuals over the year that I served with Rob, walked away from the budget committee because of the same concerns. I believe that until Kitsap County prioritizes core critical services, those being law and justice, effective roads, and land use being having DCD operating 5 days a week, we're not going to have an idea of how to get our grasp on the budget problems of Kitsap County. We have a system right now where our commissioners have for 10 years, for 20 years, since forever, have said, well, last year your budget was X amount of money. It was $1 million. This year with cost of inflation going up, it's going to be $1.4 million. Now we're going to lower that down to 1.2 or $1 million and say that you're taking a budget cut. That's wrong. You know, if you want to talk about the budget and the transparency, you know, the state auditor just came out with a report saying that Kitsap County misplaced $1 million of grant funding. That was in the Kitsap Sun. The state auditor said, you know, they didn't know where $1 million, they being our county, didn't know where $1 million was. There's no transparency. And until we focus on the 3 core functions and prioritize county government, we're never going to be able to get a handle on this. That's where I'm coming from.
Rob, can I ask you kind of a similar question? Actually, 2 questions as far as that goes. Chris just gave us what his 3 priorities would be. What are your 3 priorities? And then second to that, how do you feel about the zero-based budgeting?
Well, my priorities are law and justice, transportation and infrastructure, as well as advocating for individuals in need. When it comes to the priorities, if there was plenty of opportunity for additional transparency, that began with the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee and has continued to evolve over the past couple of years, with last year being the first that all of the budget hearings were televised and recorded so that anyone throughout the county could actually see the budget hearings, understand the questions that were being asked, and the deliberations that ensued. The same thing happened this year as well. When it comes to the budget process, as anybody setting a budget does, whether it's a small business or a large business, you look at what your sales or your revenues have been. you do your best to create a projection of what that might be, whether it's sales tax, is it going up, is it going down, what's happening with property tax, etc. So you do budget projections in order to understand where your starting point is, and then you go from backward accordingly as you need to make the necessary cuts. And for 2012, we are looking at originally about $79 million, give or take, relative to projected revenues. The initial budget requests, because the Board of County Commissioners asked all of the departments and elected officials this year to, instead of dealing with an issue of potentially a 7 or 9% cut, which was the approach that was taken last year, ask people to bring back a very realistic budget. And so they did that, and that was a little bit over $80 million. So that meant that originally going into this, we were looking at approximately a $2.4 million gap, and that's what we're grappling with right now.
Essentially, rather than asking for a straight percentage across departments, each department head was said, come up with a target. Were they given a number when they did that?
No. Based on their mandated services and service levels to the community, we asked them and charged them, because basically the Board of County Commissioners' responsibility and charge is to make allocations, budget allocations to the various departments. All of the separately elected officials have total latitude to do with those resources as they see fit to support their operations. So they determine how it's used and how it's allocated.
Chris, do you disagree with giving the department heads to do it that way?
Well, I guess my thought would be, I think, Rob said realistic budgeting. I think that our county has already passed the point of realistic budgeting. I don't think that our department heads and our elected officials are operating their county segment as a service to the public. Let's be frank here. The role of county government is to provide crucial and core services that we as individuals cannot properly provide for ourselves. You talk about an open transparency to the budget process, and Rob made a mention to the fact that that last year was the first time it was televised, that the budget process was televised. Well, it is, and if you go on the Kitsap website, you can find that in fact the budget process was televised, except for the budget book, which is the roadmap to the budget that all the commissioners have and all the elected officials have. It's a large document. It literally lists all of the monies and where it's going. That's not available online. You can find it every year except for last year. So the county commissioners have made a show of transparency, but they're not being transparent. The bottom line is this: with such a large county, 1,200 employees, with over $300 million, and of that around 70 to 80 million of that being general funds, we cannot rely on elected officials and department heads to set their own priorities. We as commissioners must say, your service is this, we're going to help you get there, and we're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to give you X amount of money. Yes, the commissioners have very little latitude, very small amounts of latitude to dictate to elected officials such as the sheriff or coroner how to fulfill their job and their duty. But we as commissioners cannot ask the tough questions. We can also ask for performance reviews, and I think that's what we need to do. We just built a brand new morgue for our coroner not too long ago. We have $100,000 of artwork for the coroner's office, for the coroner's staff. There's 5 employees there that see frequently $100,000 worth of artwork. What's wrong with that? We need to set our priorities in Kitsap County. And as an effective leader and manager, what I've done in my business and in our business for 5 years, and have had many years of experience, is I look to make essentially the most money I can with the least amount of outgo. So you sit there and you figure out how to prioritize that and be responsive to the needs of your customers. Our county commissioners at this point don't do that. Our county commissioners essentially let everybody sit at the table. We all get to decide what our budget's going to be, and then we hold the line at what that is. The elected officials hold the line. They will not give an inch. And I think that's wrong. And I think that what we have to do until we have a roadmap to really dictate the budget process, which is prioritizing county government. We prioritize what it is, the service we provide. And then we fund fully law and justice, we fund fully roads, and we fund fully land use. And when I say land use, I mean DCD. If you have a if you have a reasonable budget process, or you have the problem we have, look, DCD should be operated 5 days a week. The county administrative building should be operated 5 days a week. The county does the people's business. And by not prioritizing the budget, by not establishing clear spending guidelines, by having this 7, 9, and 10% across the board cuts, the county commissioners are essentially letting bureaucrats run the county, protecting and entrenching their employment, and we're going from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week.
It sounds like that is not the process that was followed this year, though, as far as
It's
they were not given 7 and 9%.
And actually,
That's
all
like
of
they did
the
year prior.
Well,
the
no,
documents for the budget were all online. Everything that the citizens in the budget panel had were available online for all citizens to view, and those were the budget submittals from all the various departments, which looked at not only what their projected revenues are and their expenses, but also what their measures and accountability is. So whether it's service level measures, et cetera, there are evaluation tools that are built into that process.
built in, but
And when
not
it comes to,
available-
excuse me,
Rob,
clearly,
clearly though.
Let's let Rob
The
finish.
Kitsap
you-
website, the Kitsap website does
No,
not have
actually,
that
Chris,
information.
let Rob finish the question.
I'm sorry.
we talk about responsible budgeting, and I think one great example of responsible budgeting that the county has done is the fact that we were able to put over $1 million back into our reserves last year, and we'll be doing so again this year. That's responsible budgeting. When you look at needing to have a certain level of reserve so that you can have a good credit rating, so that we can actually, most recently have gone out to refund some various 4 or 5 different bond issues that will save the county around about $150,000 each year and over $1 million for the life of those bonds. That's responsible budgeting. So I think that we need to look at it in a different way. And just to deal with, just to touch on briefly, if I could, the days of service. When you're cutting, it comes a time what is the most effective and efficient. When you're operating 5 days a week versus 4, you don't have the savings of the energy, the overhead, the utilities. That's something to keep in mind as well. But the county has, over the past several years, been investing in new technologies and resources so that there are many services that are available 24/7. And I think that's another responsible way of moving forward.
We have heard that complaint before, and it hasn't been particularly to the days of DCD, but it has been this frustration with people
Sure.
feel they can't get their permits through. And I know you've only been in this seat for a few months, so it's not you as an incumbent saying, but if opening more days of the week isn't the answer to solve that, what is? How are you going to ease the complaints that people have that Chris is going to voice?
Right, and I've actually been talking with a lot of people about this very topic, and I think that one of the approaches that we need to take is looking at, there's a difference between what's the process, and is it the process that's the issue, is it the people that are the issue? And you have to look at both of them because it is a system. And I think it's important to move forward in that regard, and that's something that I will be taking up as one of my top priorities as I go forward.
Are you saying evaluating the actual people doing the job? Is that what?
Evaluating, working with the department director to look at evaluating what are the processes, what is the system, and where is the system not allowing us to be able to process the permit requests, plats, all that, everything that comes into the Department of Community Development. What can we do to help streamline that process so that we can, and it's in our best interest because that is a fee generating,
Right.
and so the better we can be at that, not only will we be having folks get out and doing the work in the community and generating their own income, but we will be generating income for the Department of Community Development and the county. So we need it. I totally recognize, and many people recognize, that it's a system that's in need of improvement.
Chris, answer the same question because before the only kind of solution you're able to give is opening it for another day of the week.
Right.
Is that all that needs to be done?
Well, I think you have a problem with DCD in that you have entrenched management and you have a lack of significant leadership in DCD. I think that at this point we need to think outside the box when it comes to how we run DCD. DCD must be operated 5 days a week, and I say that it's not a simplistic answer. What I'm saying is if we're going to have business owners and people and residents come and invest in our community and continue to build infrastructure and build buildings, then they must be able to come there 5 days a week. You know, your dentist office is open Monday through Friday. Your real estate office is open Monday through Friday. But we also have to be responsive. You know, I think that having DCD be an enterprise-driven fund is quite frankly wrong-headed. DCD is a critical function of county government. DCD, Department of Community Development, truly helps develop our economy. And if we have these ridiculous delays on permitting, you will go to DCD, and you will pay to have an expedited fee on your permitting process. And oftentimes, if your particular planner goes on vacation, then your permit fee, your expedition, is worthless because it sits on that individual's desk till they come back from vacation. You know, DCD needs a top to bottom leadership change. But at the same time, we have to take it out of the enterprise fund because enterprise fund for DCD simply does not work. You're seeing a low economy right now. You're seeing not as many homes being built right now. So DCD's funding has been slashed dramatically. And then the small percentage it gets from the county has been slashed at the same time. We need to have DCD be a general fund, a government-funded enterprise, and we need to fund it accordingly. And people who go and have permits and apply for permits need to have a guarantee. They need to know that within a reasonable amount of time they're going to receive their permit or the rejection, but they're going to be able to build. They should be able to have a reasonable expectation that when they go to DCD, they will know how long the process will be to go through the process. That's my thought on that. And, you know, unfortunately, I think that stagnation is what we've had in DCD for some time, and I think we need some sort of leadership change.
Okay. I'm going to change your subject just a little bit. That was one of the priorities that Chris had mentioned. Rob, you had said one of your 3 priorities was human services, essentially. There's a levy, of course, to address some of that right now, but tell me your kind of a broader view on how the county should be treating that priority.
I think that, you know, the government does play an important role in providing services to the community, and it really is a service organization. We exist, and there are areas for improvement that we need to provide, but when it comes to human services, specifically the Veterans and Human Services Levy was in response to the provider community saying we have a critical issue in the community. And will the county commissioners place it on the ballot so that we can have that decision go before the citizens to provide that? We, as a county, passed through about $54 million worth of resources from the state and federal level to support mental health, job training, etc. Unfortunately, with the cuts that are coming along the line, and most likely we will be feeling it, there stands to be a lot of individuals who have been having access to drug treatment, to other mental health counseling, to job training, who are no longer be able to plug into those. Is there a role for the county to help facilitate that conversation? Yes. We need to be an advocate on behalf of those individuals, those providers, and those services at the state and federal level. Is it something that we can fund out of the general fund? No. That's not within our scope. Our general fund is smaller than some of the contracts that we actually pass through.
Well, I guess that's what I'm asking. Would you be willing to commit more money from the general fund if you're saying this should be a priority for the commissioners?
I think it's a priority for the county as a community. I don't think it's a funding priority of the Board of County Commissioners and the county as a whole. We can't be all things to all people, but we can be an advocate and a voice for those who need and who are falling through the cracks.
As a private citizen, do you support the levy initiative, the levy measure?
As a private citizen, yes.
Chris?
Social services?
Yeah, first tell me, are you in favor of the levy or not? And then how should the county do?
Well, you know, and my heart goes out to the supporters of Proposition 1, but I'm against the levy because at this time, you know, the county has a fund in place, a Veterans Assistance Fund, that the county commissioners a couple of years ago chose to defund, and I think helped to exacerbate and create this situation. I think that Proposition 1, the bottom line is if we cannot trust our county commissioners to invest our money and to spend the taxpayers' money responsibly now, how can we offer them $9 million more in new funding? You're asking a lot of a Board of County Commissioners who has in the past defunded a Veterans Fund already. So I don't support Proposition 1, not because of the people whom I think we need to support and help as best we can, but there's better groups and organizations such as United Way and Salvation Army to do just that. As far as social services, and I'll tell you this, unfortunately the county is a pass-through, and Rob mentioned that, but the county has very limited response to providing social services in Kitsap County. The monies that we receive in grant funding from the federal and state government, we don't dictate what those monies are. We pretty much ask for them, we receive the monies, we hold on to them for a short period of time, we pass and funnel them through. So if the state decides to cut our funding, then it cuts Kitsap mental health's funding and level of service. So we have a very limited role in that. And as you pointed out earlier, or as the question asked Rob about general funding, we cannot move money from the general fund to support social services. So I believe the role in the county providing social services is very limited to do just what the state and the RCW, the law of Washington is, which is to hold the money and pass it through off to other agencies. I think county government must focus on 3 core critical services. 70% of our population in Kitsap County, 70% lives in unincorporated Kitsap County. What that means is we do not live in, 70% of the population does not live in Bainbridge, Paulsbo, Bremerton, or Port Orchard. 70% of the population receives local services, not just regional services. Regional services the county provides to everyone in Kitsap County. They provide elections, tax collection, tax assessment, superior court, prosecution. Local services to that 70% of the population, Silverdale and Seabeck and Hansville, is law and justice. That's where the sheriff comes for 911. That's providing land use decisions, telling you what you can and cannot do with your backyard, what you can and cannot build on your house. And it comes down to roads. So Kitsap County's goal should be providing those services to 70%. That's our largest number one.
Come back to roads in just a second. Did you have
Yeah, just a clarifying point about the levy and actually what happened with veterans assistance, and it's specifically for indigent veterans. And the RCW requires the counties to collect a tax levy that can be anywhere from 1 1/8 cents to 27 cents per $1,000. What that is, it's not a separate levy. That's part of the total general fund levy. The decision that was made for the 2010 budget, well, actually, if Chris had still been on the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, he would have known that that committee recommended to the Board of County Commissioners to review that. When they identified the fact that they had a reserve fund for that service of near $1 million, they had the opportunity to reduce that levy amount to 0 for 2010.
Right. We had the other groups in about this.
I say one
You can
thing.
say very quickly, but I'm not going to get into an argument about what
And I don't want to get into an argument. I just want to say that just because the money was available then doesn't make it right to defund it. We should have spent that money, left the money where it was assigned.
This is where I wanted to go with the roads question. There's a meeting today with County Planning Commission. They're starting to talk about countywide trails plans, and it was actually a group in your district that has kind of taken on the first steps, at least, of that project. I'm just curious of your opinion of what the trails plan lays out right now, where it figures into transportation planning for the next couple of years. I think I'll probably let Chris start with this.
Well, you know, it's essentially this new roads, or this new trail program is essentially the legacy project rechristened. You know, if you look at what Kitsap County did in the past with Steve Bauer, former Commissioner Bauer, we asked the Olympic Property Management Group, and we asked a lot of people, a lot of concerned stakeholders, the North Kitsap Trails Association, to come together and help us to put together this proposal. And at the last moment, we pulled the rug out from underneath them. I don't think that was wise, but that's what we did. I am not a believer in spending or transferring any money or resources that do not focus on the 3 priorities of government. At this time, I don't want to look at trails. I do not think it's necessary to look at parks. I think that we must focus on providing 3 critical core services of government, and that's because, unfortunately, our economy is not strong. We cannot invest time and resources on these trails at this time when what we need to be doing is focusing, like I said, fully funding law and justice, providing road transportation network, and focusing on land use. You know, if we can't fix DCD, then why do we need to be focusing on parks at this time? I think it's an admirable project. It's something I'd like to look at the future. But in the interim right now, we cannot do that. And so I say we must fund law and justice fully. And we must think about, we must realize what it is the county's proposing, what it is the county provides to the citizens of Kitsap County.
When it comes to the North Kitsap Trails Association that created that trails plan, it's actually not the same as the Great Kitsap Forest and Bay Project, which is separate. That used to be the North Kitsap Legacy Partnership, and that's about the preservation of open space.
On the Olympic Property Group.
Correct. The Trails Association has been a group of a large number of citizens who have for the past several years have been working diligently, putting in a lot of time to create a vision and a plan for trails that interconnect the north end of the county. They've provided that to the county to incorporate it in a county-wide plan, and to their credit, they've set the bar so high that it is something to aspire to for both the central and south areas of the county as well. What it does when adopted as a trails plan, it becomes a guidepost for moving forward in terms of seeking potential funding for it. It doesn't mean that there's going to be general fund dedicated to it, but what it does is it opens the door to have the conversation with various funders. It could partner very well with the preservation of open space, but it doesn't specifically deal with roads or transportation as we look at it traditionally. We're not talking about necessarily hard surface roads. There may be some hard surface trails that are more applicable to bicycles, etc., but we're talking about a lot of it more the less structured type of, so it's not part of any kind of roads or transportation planning. This is really all non-motorized. And so it's a little bit different, but it needs to work in concert with it.
Anyone else want to jump in? I'll keep going. There's another place, and I guess this one touches on transportation, but there's another place I believe that the two of you disagree on, and that's our representation on the Puget Sound Regional Council. I'd actually just like each of you to respond to that question. Should we be involved with the Puget Sound Regional Council, and why or why not? And we'll let Rob go first.
The short answer is yes. We need to be at the table. For the amount of funds that we invest as a member in any given year, it's somewhere just in the low side of $50,000. The investment that we receive in terms of being able to plug into those transportation dollars as a regional planning organization is well worth the investment. And I know it's a point of contention, but I truly believe that we have received more than we have given, and we are better served by aligning with the I-5 corridor, because so much of our commerce is supported by that I-5 corridor and the other King, Pearson, Snohomish, than if we were to go it alone or be looking to Jefferson and Clallam County.
Can you give us an example of how that's a good investment?
Good investment is because we've been able to have dollars come back to our community to support various projects. Off the top of my head, I think one of the projects most recently has been the restructuring of the wall that in the roadway on Fjord in Poulsbo. It's not just county projects, we're looking at the region as a whole through all the jurisdictions. So collectively, all the various transportation improvement plans roll it together, go to that, and they get vetted and scored to actually compete for the funding locally or throughout the region.
Am I understanding your position correctly, that you do not think that the Kitsap County should have a seat at that table?
No, and that's exactly right. You know, I spoke with John Spellman, former governor of the state of Washington, who has endorsed me. I've spoken to Matt Ryan, former county commissioner, who has endorsed me. And why I bring John and Matt into this is this. John Spellman helped to create the Puget Sound Regional Council. And we had discussed, and for those at home, the PSRC is a regional organization comprised of King, Snohomish, Pierce County, and Kitsap County. And we receive federal and state funding, and funnels through, federal funding funnels through to benefit the local region. And essentially the PSRC helps in regional planning, such as Sound Transit, and not Kitsap Transit, but Kitsap Transit too, and regional planning such as land use. My contention is that we receive maybe 5% of the vote, because membership voting is based on population. So Kitsap County's delegation receives around 5% of the vote. We receive about 3 to 3.5% of the monies over the last 10 years. There's no fair representation. The reason you choose to be part of a metropolitan planning organization is so you can have that federal money pass through. Kitsap County's population density is at such, after the last census, where we could actually be a standalone regional planning authority. In fact, we already have one. We have the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, which is right below the PSRC, that includes the county and all of the cities, and I think the Port of Bremerton. And so what you have here is layers upon layers of government, and my contention is this. Oftentimes, the PSRC will make recommendations to the county on transportation needs and on property land use decisions, and the county wholeheartedly endorses it, supports it, and approves it. We shouldn't do that. We have elected county commissioners to represent the stakeholders and the taxpayers of Kitsap County. We do not need to be a member of the PSRC when we can be a standalone PSRC. We can be our own metropolitan planning organization, work here and join with Jefferson and Clallam, and be able to receive the same, if not more funding, because it comes from a lower basket. It's a different basket of federal funding. Additionally, you know, I would argue our transportation network ends with King County at the Puget Sound. Kitsap Transit does not operate on the I-5 corridor. Yes, we have a lot of road traffic through the I-5 corridor, but most of the I-5 corridor is dictated by the state of Washington. We have no need to be part of the PSRC. Most of the money that we receive from the PSRC goes to benefit Kitsap Transit. And even then, small portions of money. We're talking about such a small percentage here that we could certainly do better as a standalone organization. It concerns me that PSRC is making decisions on what we can and cannot do with our own land use. The idea of being a member of PSRC in simplicity would be as if someone in Arizona told you what tree you can grow in your backyard. It makes no sense. We do not need to sit at the table with King County. It does not benefit us to be part of the Seattle Club. And although a third of our population truly does commute to from Bainbridge Island, North Kitsap to Seattle every day, and works in Seattle, and maybe that third considers themselves a suburbia of King County, I ask you, what network do we have that connects us to King County and Snohomish other than the ferries?
At the beginning of the interview, Rob said there's a countywide planning policies that you disagreed with your two other fellow commissioners on. Can you explain what that is, and then I'm going to ask you to respond to what those policies are.
Well, the countywide planning policies are a document that all of the jurisdictions through the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council adopt regularly, and the point of contention there was the inclusion of the concept of fully contained communities in that planning policy. I voted to keep the language in, but the other two commissioners and several of the other electeds at the table voted to have it totally removed from the language, making it totally not allowed or able to be considered. The reason why I did that, in part, was that you need to have, it needs to be a group effort, and the fact that the whole process by which those planning policies are ratified requires a certain amount of interplay and approval by the various jurisdictions, and it wasn't going to be.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. You feel that fully contained communities have some potential, so you should keep them in the plan. Is that? I
think there's potential. The concern about it obviously was having the potential to be a tool in the toolbox for developers in the future, but realizing that it requires a population allocation and that it would have to meet a stringent list of criteria in order to be approved.
To create one.
To create one. And so my position was, instead of totally eliminating it, have it in there as one of the tools for development, but to make sure that we had criteria in place so that we were responsible in that planning moving forward.
Okay. Chris, do you have an opinion on fully contained communities?
I think that the language as it stands is adequate. You know, we're talking about fully contained communities. I think we should probably lead on to the Silverdale Incorporation question, if we could. So
take us there. Yeah, we were going to ask you anyways.
You know, I think that's an example of a new community. Silverdale Incorporating, I think, is the most critical question facing Kitsap County at this time. The ramifications of Silverdale Incorporating will be long and well felt for all of Kitsap County. You know, why I offered my service and was appointed by Josh Brown to the Kitsap County Budget Committee was, at 2008, I was concerned, what would the ramifications be for the county budget should Silverdale incorporate? I'm frustrated that the county has had no significant financial data, no significant analyst to go through again and again and look and see what the ramifications for an incorporation of Kitsap County of Silverdale would be. There's a lot of questions out there, and that's what concerns me. One, is Silverdale financially viable? Two, how much, if any, of Kitsap County's debt will the city of Silverdale accept after it becomes a city? Three, what level of service will the citizens of Silverdale receive? I am concerned that we're going to see a lopsided Kitsap County at the end of that. And what I mean by that is this. When Silverdale incorporates, right now Kitsap County's general fund, about half of our revenue comes from sales tax, the other half comes from property tax. We're one of the most unique counties of the 39 in Kitsap and in the state of Washington that is true. And I would argue a large portion of that sales tax comes from Silverdale. And so my concern is this: if Silverdale chooses to incorporate, and it's the people of Silverdale, it's their decision. One, what level of service will they receive? And two, just as importantly, what level of service will we lose in Kitsap County? I would argue Silverdale has been, I think, fairly treated by Kitsap County. I think it's fairly representative. Silverdale, if you compare the two, if you compared a fictional city of Silverdale at this time with the city of Bremerton, and you looked at the roads, I think you would argue Silverdale has better road network. If you look at the lighting structures, the traffic lights, Silverdale has better traffic lights. Silverdale has better drinking water. In fact, Silverdale Water District just received an award for best drinking water on the West Coast. Time and time again, if you look at what people associate as what would be the city of Silverdale with the city of Bremerton, I think that you will see that Silverdale has been fairly and quite frankly adequately served by the county. And so while I believe it's the residents' choice to decide if they want to incorporate, I'm concerned about what their budget will be, how much debt will they take from Kitsap County's debt load, because we don't want to be left with a significant amount of money in debt, over $100 million, and have a much lower, reduced amount of revenue coming in. And that truly does concern me, because what about sheriff response times to CVEC? If we don't have a sheriff substation over a period of time, 3 or 4 years, people that talk about incorporation of Silverdale say, well, we'll contract all the services with the county. We'll have the sheriff provide law and justice. Well, I'm sure you will for the time being. But if you look at what happened with Winslow when it annexed all of Bainbridge Island, I lived on Bainbridge at the time, shortly after the annexation, within a couple of years, there was a Bainbridge Island Police Department. There was no Sheriff's Department. And so if we lose that substation, what will the response times be for CVEC? And my thought is, on a county-wide basis, what level of service will we provide? It concerns me.
I guess the question is, well,
Silverdale
overall,
overall.
Are you anticipating this is going to happen? How are you preparing for it? How do you think the county should?
The county is preparing for it. One of the things in terms of, again, I won't have a say, I don't have a vote in this ultimately.
Right, but you still can have an opinion.
Yes, and I would say that I think that the community has been well served by it. It has received an urban level of services in an otherwise rural county. When it comes to the analysis of the impact that will have on the county, that has been underway. We've been doing that. The initial sort of moving of the lines changes the element of property tax, et cetera, but we're looking at between a $7 and $8 million hit to the general fund budget, which is 10% of our budget. And so you can't absorb that without having serious conversations. Yes, initially there will be a contracting back, and most likely for services like law and justice, roads, etc. But ultimately there is that latitude and the autonomy of that newly incorporated jurisdiction to pull back and provide those services. I think will they be able to provide that level of service at the same cost that the county is providing it? I don't think so. Because right now, that level of service is being subsidized by everybody else in the county. It's not just sales tax, it's sales tax and property tax. So with everybody in the county that's shopping there, but also it's their property taxes which are helping to subsidize services in the proposed Silverdale Incorporated area. And so that's going to be a conversation between the county and that new city government should it come together.
Okay. Guys, very good. I appreciate it. We're coming close to the time that we had promised, and so what I'd like to do is get kind of a concluding statement from each of you, and we can take 3 minutes again and do that. And one thing I'd like you to do in that concluding statement, anything we've missed that you would like to say, feel free. But also, give me one example from your background that says this is how I've dealt with budget matters in the past, and give me a success story that you can tell people. Here's what's on my track record that tells you I will do a good job when I manage this, because I think that's the big question for the county right now. And so I'd like to hear it from that perspective. And this time we'll have Rob start, and Chris get the last.
Well, thank you. One example of sort of a leadership position that I've taken relative to budgets has been recommending that senior leadership cut in pay and rolling back. And I think that the most important thing that one can do when it comes to budgets is to lead by example, and being willing to sort of step back and say, we are going to feel the pain. It's not going to be just the individuals on the front line that absorb that. So making the tough decisions, whether it's looking at salaries, looking at keeping salaries flat. I worked with several organizations where people did not receive increases for any number of years. But at some point in time, you have to come to the decision point that what is more important to maintain those jobs or to be able to retain good qualified individuals. Because at some point in time, if you are not being able to compensate individuals accordingly, or they don't feel any forward momentum, they will look for jobs elsewhere. And as soon as some other jurisdiction recovers a little bit before we do, we'll be losing staff to those areas. So I think there's a cost-benefit analysis we need to do as part of that, and that's something that I've done in the past. I think that the one thing that I'd really like to leave everyone that's viewing this and with the editorial board is that there is an important role and voice and perspective that I bring to the Board of County Commissioners, and that is a role of service. Because the county exists to be in service to the citizens of Kitsap County. The government doesn't exist for the sake of government, but how do we serve the community? How can we better interact? As we've talked about, whether it's the Department of Community Development, whether it's any of the other departments that we have any number of moments of truth where we make or break that experience for that citizen as they interact with the county. And I think it's important that we begin to put that lens on everything that we do. So I bring that forward. I bring a balanced, common sense approach to the position, and I ask for everyone's support come November.
Well, thank you. You know, currently I serve as Director of Sales and Operations for Utopia Coffee Roasters. I started with the company about 4.5 years ago, and what that is a organic coffee roaster, but also a restaurant provisions company. When I started, we had about 30 customers. We have 117 now, from Tacoma to Forks, Washington. I sell more than 500 products, whether it be cups, lids, straws, everything for a cup of coffee but the milk. We are having an all-time sales year. This is our groundbreaking year for us. We'll have a record year at the end of this year. And why we've had that is because I've been responsive to the needs of my customers. I have gone out and I've worked for my customers and worked with my customers to make sure that not only are we profitable, they are profitable. And I think that's what we need in Kitsap County right now. You know, for too long we've had what I think is one-party rule in the county. And I don't particularly think that it's a liberal or conservative look. I think that when you have one party controlling any form of government, it's bad. What I offer is independent leadership for Kitsap County. What I offer is business know-how on how to run a budget, how to manage a budget. I have made payroll, I have paid sales tax, I have paid property tax. And I'll tell you that we can and we will have a strong, sound county. But to do that, we have to roll up our sleeves and we have to prioritize county government. You know, until we say we provide these level of services, we say law and justice must be provided, land use must be provided, we must provide roads. Until we prioritize our county government, we're going to have a giant basket of a lot of ideas and a lot of things we want to do. You know, right now in Kitsap County, we haven't had a very balanced board, and we haven't had a very conservative, financially sound board, in my view. I think the county commissioners have routinely proposed 7, 9, and 10% budget cuts. This year, they're saying it's different, and then in this year what they've done is they've asked each of the department heads to give them a proposed budget. But that's a little like me asking my 6-year-old niece, well, what do you think your allowance should be? You know, I'm the adult. We must answer these questions in Kitsap County. We must offer that change, and I believe I am the person for that. My opponent and I, we've been running I've been running for about 90 days. He's been running for about 6 months for election. And I'll tell you, I've doorbelled more than 1,600 homes. And the two things that concern me the most, number one, people feel disenfranchised by all forms of government, whether it be the federal, whether it be the state, whether it be the county. And that concerns me, because if I'm going to represent the people of Kitsap County, if I'm going to serve them and provide critical services that they can't themselves afford, because obviously we can't have, you know, I mean, that's what the role of county government is, then what I need to do is be responsive to them. And I don't believe that Kitsap County is being transparent or responsive to the needs of the citizens of Kitsap County. So my name is Chris Tibbs, and I certainly would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.